All right, good afternoon. Good morning to you all. Thank you so much for joining. Wherever you are in the world, we're going to go ahead and kick it off and get started on this MadCap Central presentation today. My name is Jennifer Morse, and I am with MadCap Software, and I'm just honored that you've all chosen to join me for the next hour, where we're going to take a look at MadCap Central. Now, a couple of conventions I just want to remind everyone. There is a question area in the GoToWebinar console. Please feel free to use this as a place to ask questions as we go. I'll do my best to get to as many as we can at the end. We have a lot to cover today, so whatever I don't get to live, we'll follow up with you personally. So again, you should see the question area there. If you don't, give me a little high sign perhaps in the chat. But we should be good to go and ready to get started. Now, we got a lot to cover. I do have just I have one slide actually that I'd like to review for everybody, just to kind of set the stage in terms of what we're going to talk about. As I mentioned in the MadCap Flare demo yesterday, MadCap Central is part of the overall authoring and management system that MadCap software offers. And it is sort of a core component to that, and it does a lot of things. In fact, let's go through that right now. So what is this MadCap Central, and where does it fit into the entire content management workflow? Well, it's a cloud platform that we've developed, and it works with Flare. It does not replace Flare, but it works with it. And it's designed to help you plan, help you track, manage certain processes, your Flare projects, and all of the teams that are responsible for producing documentation. And if we were to kind of distill it down into what it's meant to do, it's really meant to augment Flare as that desktop tool for all of your content authoring management of that single source of truth. So what is it? Well, a big thing that Central offers is source control. Whether you're a team of one or a team of many, source control is essential. Oftentimes, authors don't have the resources available to them to get a source control platform set up or going, or perhaps you've got a source control system internally that you don't like, and getting those resources from IT can be a little bit tricky. Well, Central really helps with this. With a couple clicks of a button, Flare authors can instantly have a Git source control backend that's secure and can instantly collaborate with one another with just a couple clicks. No need to ask IT for any kind of help. You are completely self-reliant to do this yourself. And then we'll see in a moment that all of the pushes and pulls and all of the interaction with Git is actually done through the Central interface. So it's quite easy to do. Task management. This is another area where Central really provides a lot of assistance. When we built Central years ago, we made some observations. We actually went and observed, how do teams of authors or single authors, how do they keep track of all of the things they have to do to get content out the door? And what we observed, and again, we looked at lots of different situations and lots of different teams, we saw some very interesting things. We saw authors keeping notes on pieces of paper. We saw sticky notes on walls, notes on whiteboards, people using different types of task management systems that some people had access to, others didn't. Some people had just all this great knowledge in their brain and they didn't share anything with anybody. So it kind of crossed the spectrum of task management and information sharing. Well, what we've done with Central is we've created this really easy to use task board environment where authors can create high-level tasks for one another, and you can create tasks for yourself to kind of keep track of all the things we have to do to get content out the door. And we can create these detailed project checklists. If you're the type of person that likes to make lists and cross things off, then you're going to love checklists because we can create these workflows that actually tie into our project files. So that's an option in Central as well. Browser-based review. Getting subject matter experts involved is another area that's been a bit challenging. So MadCap offered a tool called MadCap Contributor for a very long time. In fact, it's still offered as a tool, as a way, and Contributor was offered as the way to fold in subject matter experts into the review process. But we often heard it was challenging to get subject matter experts to install and use another piece of software. Now, you can agree or disagree with me here, but we've seen that, or I've seen at least, that subject matter experts can come in lots of different skill sets, right? You might have some that are super technical. You might have some where if you handed them a Word document, they may not know where to turn on track changes and start doing their edits. So it's really, again, there's a spectrum here. Well, even though contributor was meant to be this scaled down word processor, it was still different. So we often got some grumblings from those who were asked to use contributor that they didn't want to use it, or they didn't want to install it, or if they want to put a Windows application on their machine. Well, the new review workflow with Central changes all that. We've done away with the need to install any kind of desktop tool. The review workflow in Central means our subject matter experts can be invited to our license to review content in a web browser, our source topics in a web browser. They're not looking at the output yet. We're just asking them to review our source files. And they can edit those topics using an extremely simple, lightweight web editor. It doesn't look like Flare. It doesn't feel like Flare, but it's not meant to. It's meant to be very simple by design. Edits, basic styling, and we'll see this in a moment, maybe insert an image, a row of data in a table, adding comments, basic text edits. So again, it's not meant to give the power of Flare that content authors have in Flare. It's meant to be simple and get them folding in their comments and their edits and their changes very, very easily. So build management, content hosting, translation management. This is another thing that Central can do for you. There optionally, you can build your targets in Central automatically. Maybe you want to set up a build schedule in Central where when you check in all of your changes into Central at the end of the day, because remember it's source control, you can tell Central to wake up at 2 a.m. and build all of your targets. So when you come in the morning as an authoring team, you have a private staged area to see all of the work that you did yesterday, all of your output. Optionally, you can tell Central to host your content, right? It's really easy to build output in Flare. We got to make our content available to end users. And so Central can act as a web server for you if you want to have an easy way to make your outputs, HTML5s, PDF, etc. If you want to host them easily and manage it yourself, Central offers some very easy content hosting, so your content can be available to your end users. And there's some translation management as well. We can tie in our projects and we can get a quick analysis and a quote from our Mad Translations team in-house. Nothing binding there, but it's just a very easy way to tell Central that you want these targets translated, you need it translated into all these languages. Central zips all that up and sends it to our Mad Translations team, and they can give you an analysis and a quote and a turnaround time. Again, nothing's binding. It's just a really quick way to get an analysis if you're crossing that translation bridge. And then the last thing we're going to touch on today, and I touched on it a little bit yesterday, is output analytics. Super flexible. One of my favorite things about Central. It's essential. If you are creating web-based output, HTML5, we need to get feedback and information on how effective that information is. What are people looking at? What are they searching for? What are they searching for that they can't find? What topics and pages are important to them? So we can make decisions very quickly based on how people are using this great content that we're producing every day, and we can decide how we want to augment it and make it better based on that usage. And the great thing about the output analytics, and I'll say this again at the end, output analytics is the one thing in Central where we don't actually have to bind or host or build anything in Central to get. If you have a Central account, you can track as many HTML5 targets that you're producing out of Flare as you want. You can host your content anywhere with this feature, and you can actually bind your projects to any source control platform that you want. So it's the one feature in Central where you don't actually have to connect your project there. It's quite flexible. There's a lot of customers out there who use Central for every single bullet that you see here. We have some customers using Central only for the output analytics because it's the data is so quick and easy to gather that what they're able to get and act on pays for Central very quickly. So everybody's a little different. You can use all of these things or maybe just some of these things depending on your needs. But if we were to break down Central into those feature buckets, that's kind of what it is. So just want to remind everybody, feel free to drop in questions if you have them as you go. I'm going to put PowerPoint away and I'm going to pull up my trial license of Central. So Central, as I mentioned, it's a browser-based platform. If you don't have it yet, if you're interested in trying it out, well, what you do is you go to our website, you sign up for a trial, and you get an email. And in that email is a link to access your secure instance, and you're going to create a password to log in. So that's the very first thing you'll do is just log into your instance of Central. So I'm logged into mine here. I have my name up here on the top. I have my license name up here. And we'll see, the first thing you come to is this home dashboard. And my home dashboard's got a bunch of widgets on here. Widgets are just little information objects. that tell us a little something special about what's going on here. So everybody's idea of what's important to them is different. So everybody's dashboard is going to look a little bit different. So I'll spend a little time on this at the end if we have time, but just real quick, up here is where we can add our widgets to our dashboard. We have a few here from which to choose. And every time you drop one in, each widget has a little gear up here. So maybe you want to adjust what you see in that particular widget. So it's just sort of a look down view into various things happening in Central. Other functional areas over here on the left, we see projects and analytics and sites and reviews, all these things. Now, there isn't necessarily a rule that you have to start in any particular area here, but I think my advice, though, if you're going to be trying this out, a really good place to start is this users page. So I'll select this here. And what you see is a long list of users. These are the folks that I've invited to my license that can interact with me here. There are 3 seat types in Central. There are authors, there are subject matter experts, and then there are viewers. So 3 different roles. Okay, so usually authors in Central are going to be the Flare users, because when you get invited as an author to Central, you get access to all of the functional areas here in Central. Subject matter experts, and I'll show you this view in just a moment, subject matter experts do not have access to all of these things here. Okay, they only have access to this reviews page, which we'll take a look at. And then viewers, the whole point of the viewer role is to not get access to this application at all. One of the features of Central, as I mentioned, is content hosting. And so if we decide to create a host output on Central and we lock it down and make it private so that only certain people can log in and see it, well, we can invite all of those viewers to our site and invite them to log in to see it. So there's no charge for viewer seats. We call that the eyeball charge. You can invite as many viewers into the Central license as you want, but their role is really only to see sites that you want to make available outside of your authoring team so that they can log in and see what everything's looking like. If we want to bring somebody on, it's just this little stick figure here, this little icon here. We tell Central what we're going to do. Are we going to add a user? Okay. And what kind of person are they going to be? Are they going to be an author? Are they going to be a subject matter expert and then a viewer? And you just walk through the wizard here, first name, last name, email, and you keep going, and then it'll click send invite. So that person will be invited. Let me close out of this. And you'll see them. They'll be added to this row. So when you first log into Central, if you're the only one using it, you're going to be the only row here and you'll be the admin. So you can have as many admins as you want. Admins are authors, but admins are noted here by this little crown next to their name. So if you've got a crown next to your name, that means you are the queen or king in this thing, and you have the power to giveth and taketh away other powers in Central. So a little bit about users there. The other nice thing about being an admin in Central is that you can musical chair these people around. You'll notice I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 subject matter experts here. A couple of them are grayed out. Well, I have the power to activate and deactivate people that I've invited. Okay, so let's say as an example, I need to, click this user here and I need to put Mark on Park. Maybe I need to transfer his login to somebody else. Maybe I don't need him as an SME for the next few months. Well, I can select his name and I can deactivate him, for example. And you'll notice he'll turn to gray there. That means I've just freed up a seat to invite somebody else. So if I'm only paying for 4 SME seats, it's quite easy to move these people around and make sure we've got the right folks on here. So that's a little bit about users. I want to talk, though, a little bit about projects. So projects are, before I do, forgive me, I skipped tasks. I want to talk a little bit about tasks. I mentioned that Central offers these task boards that we can use as authors. And the purpose of the task board is for authors in Central to create these high-level tasks, not only for ourselves, but perhaps other authors on the team. So you can see here, I've got 2 task boards here. I've got this one, and I've got this one that was just created called Fall Release. So this might represent a bunch of tasks that we're working on as a team for the upcoming release. So if I take a look at this one here, it's this sort of Kanban board style. So tasks can be in to-do state, they can be in this in progress state, or they can be completed. Now there's 2 tasks here. Okay, so let's take a look at one of these. I'll just select it here. So this is a task that a colleague created for me. Okay, here's the title of it. Looks like I'm a little bit past due on this task. And he gave me some information. He wants me to log into this checklist and see what's going on. But tasks can have a discussion going back and forth. Maybe we need to attach notes from a meeting here, we can. So it's sort of this like running little card that we can create to stay on track in terms of what's happening for this task. Okay, so when we're working on one, if I start working on this thing like he asked me to, I can just drag it over to that in progress column, and I can just keep moving this through its life cycle as I go. Eventually, we'll complete the task, and I'll move it over here. And every time I do that, because my colleague Mike created that for me, he's going to get a notification actually that lets him know that I did it, if he turned on that kind of notification. There's a lot of little notification and permission things you can control in Central in terms of how you want to be notified of things. So we'll just keep moving our tasks through on the life cycle. If we need to create a task, pretty simple. It's that little plus button. We give it a title. We fill in the card. Maybe it's a task I'm assigning to myself just to keep myself honest with something I got to do. I can put all of this in here, and I know that I can always come to this board and get a sense of where I am for that high-level task. So this is actually one that I created for myself. Let's have a look. So I told myself, start on the Feature A widget updates, due on May 27th. So maybe that's in progress. I can move it over here. And then once things are done, of course, we've got a couple options up here. We have an archive. Maybe you complete the task, we want it off the active board. Well, we can move it into this archive here. I mean, we don't want it to throw it away, right? We might need to refer back to the way, what did we talk about? What did we attach? We're not deleting it necessarily. We're just getting it off that active board so that it's not kind of complicating our view. And then there's the idea of a backlog. I don't know if I have anything here, but the idea of a backlog is, let's say you created a task for yourself or somebody created a task for you. Great idea, but you got to stick a pin in it and maybe revisit it at a future date. Again, we can move it here and turn any of those backlog tasks into something that's more active. It just gets it off that active board and helps you keep it clean and tidy. All right, so that's a little bit about task. Again, very high level, really meant for us as authors. Let's talk a little bit about projects. This represents a list of all of the projects that I've copied or cloned up on Central. Remember I said Central is a secure Git source control backend. So this represents the projects that are connected and synced to Central, where that's going to be our remote Git repository. So the way we get our projects up to Central is actually not through the Central interface. We do that on the Flare side. So I'm going to switch gears here. I'm going to open up a Flare project, and I want to show you how we can easily connect our projects to Central and start using that as our source control backend and stay in sync with the other authors. So I have a project here, pretty simple. Okay, nothing fancy, but I have this project just local to my machine. I don't have any kind of source control options here. I'm not connected to Central yet, but I do have a Central account. So if I come up to this view ribbon up here, I have a MadCap Central button, and this is going to allow me to log into Central from Flare. So it's the username is your email. So it's whatever email you used when you signed up for Central, and it's the password that you put in is the same password that you created when you signed up for your Central instance. So you're basically logging into Central from Flare into your instance. And you'll notice when you do that, you'll know you're successful because you see your name and your email, and you have access to these new buttons here. Now, we only have to clone our project up there one time, and then that binding will maintain itself. We don't have to constantly bind the project up there. Well, we're going to use this little button here. And you get a nice little tooltip. It looks like the end of a plug. It says upload this project from Central. We're going to plug it in up there. And when I select this button, I get this little handy license or wizard. So I have my license here. By default, it's going to grab the name of your project. You can change it if you want to. It's just whatever you put in here in the project name is the label that'll show up in Central. I'll just keep it as is. And then optionally, you can put in a little project description if you'd like. So when I say okay, we're going to go through a little binding exercise here. What Flare is doing is it's taking this local project that's only local to my machine, and it's cloning it up on Central so that Central will be our remote Git repository for this. And we should get a message here in a moment that says, oh, there it is. I'm waiting for GoTo to catch up. It says bind successful. Good news. When I say okay, you'll notice we have some information here. And I probably should have pointed this out. Notice now I have a brand new ribbon available to me called source control. And now we have all of these new buttons. And what's all of this? Well, this is all of the Git these are all of the Git commands coming through to us in the central interface. So Git is a push and pull kind of paradigm. Right? We're always working on a local copy. We make our changes and then we push them up to the remote repository. In this case, that's going to be central. So now, without having to ask IT or set up any servers, we have this instant source control backend. Okay, now you might have another author on your team. They're an author in Central, and they're an author in Flare. You've already connected this project up there. In fact, if we pop on up over to Central, we'll see, let me refresh the page here. We should see it in this list. We'll give it a moment. There it is. So it's up there now. I might have another author on my team. Okay, if I edit the profile of this project, let's go to Teams and Users. And I'm going to say, you know what, there's another author on my team that needs access to this. So I'm going to invite that person. I'm going to ask that person, or I'm actually going to just assign it here. I'm going to tell Central, hey, this is the other author on my team. I want Keaton to be able to log into Central and pull this project down. So now we've got two authors here assigned to this project or able to work on this project now. And if we come back, what Keaton's going to do, if I could pretend I'm Keaton for a moment, I would open up Flare. I'd log in to Central just like I did, but instead of binding a project, I would use this option here. This is import a project from Central. Again, you only have to do it once. And what this is going to allow Keaton to do is log into Central and choose the project that I've connected him to up there and do a pull. That way he and I can work on the same project and push and pull in Central and stay in sync. Now we only have to do that once. If you shut down Flare tonight and you open it back up tomorrow, it's going to know it's connected to source control. It'll prompt you to do a pull, basically asking you, do you want to get the latest version of all your files? And you can say yes, and it'll pull down all the changes so you're ready to go for that day. So that connection only has to happen once, and Flare will detect that binding so that you can continue to push and pull and follow that whole Git philosophy in the Flare interface. So that's how easy it is to get our project up there. Now, let's say as an example, moving on, okay, from the project side of things, what about those reviews? I mentioned that we can do this web-based review workflow, and we've got that subject matter expert seat I've got some folks invited there. I've got this topic here. Okay, what if I've started this topic and I've got some SMEs on my team who know a little bit more about server configuration overview. So I gave it a start, but I might need to ask some other folks to help me author the rest of this topic, or maybe other topics that I've written. And that's where this review workflow that comes in. I've connected, I've bound to Central, and when I've done that, what I can do is I can initiate a review. So I'm going to come up here to my review ribbon. The review process with Flare and Central, it always starts and ends with the Flare author. The Flare authors are really the hub because you all own that single source of truth. So you're going to manage it still in Flare. But our project is synced, coming up to that review tab, and I'm going to send this topic out for review. So I just selected that first button there. This is the topic I'm going to send. I can send additional files if I'd like, additional topics. Down here is where we tell Flare, all right, how are we going to send it for review? Are we going to use the web-based Central way? Or are we going to use the contributor way, which would save a file and you daisy chain it around to everybody that's got contributor? Well, we're using Central. Okay, so I've got that selected. And we'll say next. And what I'm going to be presented with here is a list of all of my active authors and SMEs in my Central license. Now, I know I said SMEs are there for review, but we can also ask authors to review our license as well. Okay, so I'm going to say, well, I'm going to just cheat for a moment because I do want to show you the review workflow. I can really only be one person at one time. So I'm going to select Tim. Tim is an SME on my license so that I can switch to Tim and show you what his experience is going to be as an SME. But just know we can ask anybody on this list to review the file. So it would almost be like if you've ever reviewed a Google Doc or a Google Sheet and multiple people have been invited to review it, you might see some edits happening dynamically. That's kind of the same experience, but because I can only be one person here, I'm just going to choose one person. So I'm going to hit send. And we get a message here that says files have been sent for review on Central. Right at that moment, Tim just got an email in his inbox. And in that email, it says, Dear Tim, you have files for review. Click here to view them. And when Tim clicks that link in his email, what he's going to see, I had to do it in another web browser over here. Let me drag it over. When he clicks the link in his email, because he's been invited as an SME, this is what he's going to see. It says a message here. It says, review your topic. Select a file from the left to get started. A couple things to notice. I'm logged in as Tim. Remember, Tim is an SME. You can see it in parentheses there. Over here on the left, notice that Tim does not have access to all that other stuff that we did as an author. Only thing he can do is reviews because that's his role in Central. Well, there's that getting started topic that I just sent him about a minute or so ago. And you'll see that it loads in Central's lightweight web-based editor. And remember I said in the beginning, the editor is lightweight and simple. It's lightweight and simple on purpose. Again, it doesn't look like Flare. It doesn't feel like Flare. It's not meant to. We want to get simple edits from Tim here. So he might say, something like forgot step 4 or whatever he does. So notice as I start typing as Tim, I don't have to turn on track changes. They're already showing up here in the gutter. Very basic toolbar styling up here. These things map back to our style sheet. I might decide, this looks like, as Tim, I might decide that looks like it could be a second level heading. I do get a little bit of structural information here, not too much, not too confusing, but maybe I decide that should be a second level heading. Also go ahead and select H2. You can notice the old one's crossed out. The new one's dropped in. Kind of similar, you turn on track changes in Word, for example. Everything you do gets sort of a track change, essentially, deleted, added, etc. I might add some data here, like this. Maybe I decide I need to right-click and add a row above or below, for example. I can do that. I can drop in a new table, maybe an image that needs to be used in the file. Lots of options. Maybe I want to drop in a comment. I'll go ahead and insert an annotation here. I'll say something like, this looks great. All right, so there's my comment. So as Tim, I mark this up, I add my comments, I add my edits, and I do my thing. When I'm done, all I have to do is click this green submit button, and I'm done. I can go on to the next file here on my list. Now I don't have any more, so we're good. Now, if I did, of course, we would see them there and I can go through and do my edits. When the last person that's been invited to review this file actually hits that submit button, as authors, you're notified. So you've got files ready to come back to you in Flare. So like I said, the process starts and ends with you as authors. So now that Tim is done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my Jen hat on for a moment, and we're going to pop back to Flare and see how we pull all those changes in. All right, so here we are back in Flare. There's another little helper window that you're going to have open often. Excuse me, one moment. So there's another window up here that you're going to have open often if you're doing reviews. It's right here. It's right here in the Review tab. It's called File Reviews. So when I select this option here, you'll see I have this new window pane that opens, and this is really nice because this shows us the files that are coming and going from our Flare project. So this is the topic I sent out for review. This is the one, oops, let me move this over here. This is the one that's come back to me from review. So I'll go ahead and submit it here. I'm gonna go ahead and select it, and it's gonna load. And we'll see kind of the raw edits. So it tells me here this is my reviewed topic. And what I'll do is I'll accept and reject these things. I can do it one by one, just like we would in Word, for example. But I'm gonna save myself a little time. I'm gonna accept all changes, all right? So everything's accepted, it's looking great. A little point about annotations. They hang out in our topics, just in our source. They don't ever get published out. So you can choose whether you want to keep those annotations in there. You can delete them if you want. It's totally up to you. Or you can keep them in there and turn them off. That's another option as well. Everybody's a little bit different on how they handle those annotations. So totally up to you. The other thing too, I should have pointed out, before you send topics for review, let's say you had a topic and you inserted an annotation here in your Flare topic before you sent it out for review. I see that sometimes if you've got, let's say, a really long topic with like 20 procedures in it. Maybe you just want your reviewer to focus on steps 5 through 10. Well, you might, put a little annotation here, right? And just ask them, hey, just focus on number 3, right? You could drop in an annotation. Focus on 3 through 10 or whatever it is. And that annotation is going to show up for your reviewers in Central in the gutter there on the right-hand side. So when we're done here, we've accepted everything. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to accept the file. This is going to merge the reviews into our source here. And I'll go ahead and merge it in. And if we take a look at getting started here, now we can see that we've got all of the changes from Tim merged into our source. So now we can do what we do. What if we, change what Tim said because it's not written well, this is step 4 or whatever it is.
Okay, so if we save that change, we do what we do. We insert our conditions, our variables, all that single sourcing power now. And because we're connected to central or source control, we can commit these changes, right? We have to put it back into the single source of truth. And that's where the source control ribbon comes in. Now I'm the only one, so I can go ahead and do a synchronize. Now, because we're with Git, we want to commit our changes locally, and then we can push them up to central. So I'll say something like sent to Tim for review. Comments are great when you're working in source control, because one of the wonderful things about source control, and I'm just going to push my changes up to central now, is that every time we make a change to a file and we save it and commit it, central saves that as a little version of that change. And so you get this running history of how your files are changing and evolving over time. And you always have access to that history. So I just pulled up the history of this file. And again, you get this with source control. This was what I committed here together. We did this together. This is version 1. This is coming back to Tim for review. So again, I only have 2 in here, but imagine as the topic changes and evolves over time, you're going to have these versions. And what if, next week I realize that somebody did something they shouldn't in a style sheet or did something in the topic? I can always come to my history. I can choose the version that I want, and I can hit get selected version. It's going to revert it back to the way that topic was at that state. So it's a wonderful safety net to have. Something happens to your hard drive, you rebuild your machine and reinstall Flare. With your project connected to source control, you can always just pull down the project. You're not lost completely if your hard drive is wiped out. That's the other benefit of source control. Actually, there's lots of benefits, but those are 2 of the biggies. So with this review process, again, nobody has to install anything. Okay, nobody has to daisy chain files around the table like you do with Microsoft Word or Contributor, right? And if you're using something like Word, for example, you still got to get those comments back into your project, or those edits back into your project. So this is an integrated way to do it. We can have more than one person in there at the same time. So that we can have multiple people seeing what's happening and giving their comments. And it's just a simple, lightweight editor, nothing complicated there. So I just wanted to make sure. I know I went a little fast there on the reviews, but if you have any questions on that, do let me know. All right, let's go back to Central. I want to touch quickly on sites. So sites are, it's a collection of information about an output that you're producing. So when you build in Flare, you get output. It could be an HTML5 site, could be a series of PDFs or whatever. Well, we want to make that available to end users, and we can use sites in Central to create like an accessible URL for our end users to access that information. So I've created a number of sites here. Sites can be public, meaning anybody that has the URL. We'll take a look at this one here. So anybody that has this URL can get access to that site. Well, let's edit this and we'll take a look at some of the settings here. I'll use this as an example. When we create a site, we need to give it a name. Okay, I just put an acronym in there. We can give it a vanity. So when you build output, you might want to give it a special version number, appended at the end of the URL. So this is version 5 or version 6 of the site that you're creating, or of the knowledge base, for example. And then down here is where you would say, all right, well, I'm going to create a site out of which project? Well, you'll select your project. You'll select the target in that project. And one thing I didn't mention, just because of time, we don't have time to go into it, but Flare and Central supports Git branching. And I don't know if anybody's used branching here on the call, but branching is a wonderful way to create these snapshots of your project so that you can work on these sort of continuous paths of your project and decide, well, if we're working on a version of our project in the future with a bunch of new features that's not generally available, well, you might create a branch of your project and work on that independent of what is generally available. And when you're ready, you can merge all of that content in to a branch and make it available. So it's a great way to create these continuous parallel working environments of your project. You're not duplicating anything in terms of your source. You're just creating these separate environments to work in, and then you can choose what gets grafted into a particular branch. So I've only got one in this project, and then you can specify specifically what build you'd like to include. So once you set all this up, you can say, I want to make it live. Maybe if you want the search engines out there of the world to crawl, you can check this box, or if you don't have to. Setting it live means anybody gets this URL. There's no login required. There's another option here called set to private. If we set to private, what that does is it locks down that URL, and nobody can get to that site unless they are a viewer in Central and they've been made part of a team. So we didn't talk about teams, but teams are a collection of users in Central. So there's a little bit of order of operations with sites if we want to make them private. We want to create the site, we want to make it private, and then we want to associate the teams that can access that site. So you're controlling access. So this is a great way. Let's say you're creating a brand new beta site, like a brand new knowledge base, let's say, and you're working on a new design and you want to make this available to an internal set of managers or QA engineers, just so that folks internally want to check it out and see what you're doing. It's not ready for prime time, but you want to lock it down to a certain number of people. Well, you might think about creating a site out of that project and then maybe inviting those QA engineers or those managers in as viewers into Central and putting them into a team. And then you can attach that team to the site. And anybody that's in that team will be able to create a password to access this URL. So it's one great option when we're QAing live content. When we want to see the whole kit and caboodle, maybe we want to lock it down to a certain set of eyeballs. Well, using the private sites feature is pretty cool. So we don't have to ask IT to stand up servers or anything like that. We can use Central and be self-reliant to do that ourselves. So if it is private, I'll show you what you might be greeted with. I think I have one here. Let's take a look at this one. The other thing you can do when you have a private site, you can create something called a theme. Now I have a few themes here. A theme is kind of like a skin in Flare. It's sort of a branded page that you see when you access that private site. So I've got 3 here. Let me see this one called Fiction Soft, and that's the one we'll do. And let me see if I can recreate this here, and I'll use my other web browser so it doesn't think I'm logged in. Let's see. Oh, there we go. So do you see how we can't get access here? So I've created this theme, which is this logo. I've made it this purple color. I've made the button. So you can customize this login page so that it looks branded. Maybe you have your own corporate logo. You can put it like a color gradient here. There's lots of little elements you can design, but it's just a way to create this somewhat branded experience when we come to this login site. So I would have to actually log in here to get to this. I think I'm in this. Can't remember. Let's see. Nope, I have to send a request. So that's how locked down it is. So that's how we would privatize the output if we wanted to. Okay, and we can create sites out of HTML5s, we can create PDFs, we can create sites out of Word documents if we want to. Any output that Flare can produce, you can create a site out of it. All right, a little bit about sites there. Let's talk a little bit about analytics, one of my favorite things. Remember, our central account can track as many different targets that we want. Analytics is the one thing here where we don't actually have to bind our projects to Central. We don't have to host it there. As long as we have a central account, we can use the analytics feature. So I've got a few here, and we'll take a look at these because I've got some fun data in here to show, but I want to show you how easy it is to start collecting data on our targets. So I'll go back to my project, and it's not going to be very interesting because it's just me, but the way we do it is we come to our project organizer. Here's my target. All right, so if I open this up, this is my website that I'm going to start tracking. Down here in our target editor, there's a little analytics tab, and this is where we're going to choose Central as our analytics provider. So it logged me in. Okay, here's my license. All I have to do is create a key, and I'll call this, maybe I'll call this partner KB, like partner knowledge base. You can put in a description in here if you want. And I'm going to say okay. It creates a key, and I'm going to go ahead and build. I'm just going to build this locally. I'm not going to put it on a server. I'm not going to host it in Central. I'm just going to build it locally. And while that's building, we'll take a look here in Central. And if I refresh the page, we can see there's that key that I just created. It was pretty quick. Central is waiting for people to hit that thing. Now, we don't have any data in there yet. I'll go ahead and select it because nobody's hitting it, but we'll try to populate it with some data here so we can see how quick it is to access. And then I'll take a look at some of the other analytics, and we'll go through them with another site that I'm tracking that's got a bit more fun data in there. So let's open up my output here. This is just local to my machine. There's that topic we were looking at. So I'll just type in assemble. I'm going to see if I can populate the database here with some things. with some words. Maybe what's new. I'm searching for things here. Let's search for something that we know isn't in here. JavaScript. Oh, we're searching for that, nothing. So we'll come back to this a little bit. If we come back to Central here, it's usually pretty quick. It might take us a minute or two to see some data show up. If not, we'll go take a look at another set of metrics that I'm tracking. Well, that was pretty quick. So we can see right away, this is just me. So the data is not very interesting. That output is actually local to my machine. It's not on a server. So it's a really great example of how flexible this is. But the phrases, these represent the successful searches that are done. It's collecting the actual query your end users are typing in, the number of times that query was used, how many results were offered, right? So maybe you got 100 results if you searched on what's new in your world. I only had 2 topics in there, so it's not going to yield a lot of results. But this is actually going to tell us how many results were given to the user in the search results, and whether micro content was offered as a result. Now, we didn't get a chance to talk about micro content, but micro content's a big deal. It's a wonderful way to optimize the search experience for your end users. And micro content in Flare, they're just phrases that pair to a response, and maybe alternate phrases pair to the same response. It's a way to ensure your customers or your end users do not work very hard to find what they need. So if they search on a term, they might you might have done this in Google. You see it in Google every day. You probably did a Google search 10 minutes before joining this webinar. You searched for a term and Google gave you 10 million hits. But at the very top, or maybe along the side, you got this little promoted answer. It's maybe text, it may be images, it may be a picture, a video. Sometimes it's a combination of those things. And that's what micro content is in Flare. It's text, it's images, a video, maybe a combination of them. It's something that answers your reader's question maybe in like 10 or 30 seconds, right? They don't have to wade through a whole bunch of stuff to find the answer. So what this is telling us is whether you've spent a little time creating phrases and responses. So if we had created a micro content phrase in our project called What's New or Assembly or something like that, and somebody searched on it, this would not be an X, this would be a checkbox. And this is great as you start your micro content strategy because you can filter here. So as you start spending some time building out your micro content, you might just want to filter out, hey, show me the search queries where I haven't spent any time building out any micro content. Help me focus in my efforts a little bit here. So we can use this analytic data to our advantage when we're augmenting our project and editing it and adding micro content for our end users. So phrases with no results, though, this, in my opinion, is really one of the most important metrics here. This is the one we want to pay attention to because this is what your end users are looking for that they can't find, and the number of times that term was searched for. So if they're not finding it in your doc portal or your help or your training manual, whatever it is you're making, they're probably opening up a more expensive tech support case. Not that you don't want to talk to your customers. We love to talk to customers. But if we know that customers also like to self-serve, and if they can find what they need quickly, they're not opening up that case that costs a lot more than this platform here. So we can really reduce those tickets that come in. We start getting into that ticket deflection, right? We start making a big difference on the bottom line in the ROI. This starts to pay for itself quite quickly. And we know how to make it better based on how people use it. The topics, so again, I'm going to switch to another knowledge base that I'm tracking because this is not very interesting here. Let me move on to a different one that's got a little bit more eyes hitting it. Let's take a look at the topics. We'll use this as an example. And topics represent a hit in your output. So if you visit a page, Central's going to collect it, and it's going to collect the number of times that page was viewed. So you can sort by view count, you can sort by the title of the topic. I think sorting by view count is really helpful. This gives you an idea of the topics you want to keep up to date because they're important to your readers. Everybody's visiting these things. So make sure these topics and these pages are up to date in your project. Context-sensitive help calls. This one's really interesting. If you're in a place where you're going to be taking your topics and you are going to be, or your micro-content responses, which can also be contextually linked, if you're going to take that information, if you're going to embed it into your app, maybe you're doing window-level help or field-level help, any kind of embedded help, you're taking that documentation and you're hooking it into the application. If you're using Flare's context-sensitive help process, well, then we see here where in the application your end users are getting stuck in calling for help. We know that ID 1001 is someplace in the application. Why is everybody getting stuck there and calling for help? Maybe you don't have a documentation problem on our hands. Maybe we've got a UX problem on our hands. So it gets you good data when you come to the table and we start talking about changes that we're going to make, perhaps with development. Browser stats, this is telling us the browsers and the versions that are being used to hit our sites. So this is great information too. Maybe you didn't think you needed to worry about a responsive content strategy. You might think, I don't have any mobile users, we're all desktop. And you might run the analytics here and you might see, gosh, I've got a growing percentage of people that are using a browser on the phone trying to access my knowledge base. We got to make sure things are looking great. Maybe we have a good responsive content strategy on our Flare project now because this viewership is growing and we can actually see the versions here. And the other nice thing about this is maybe it helps you make some decisions too about the browsers that you just test on in general. What if, as an example, let's say this doesn't say Chrome, let's say this Internet 10 or 11 or some crusty old browser that you really don't want to be supporting anymore. And you notice, well, gosh, one person has hit this thing. Why do we keep breaking our necks trying to support this web browser if we have such a low viewership? Maybe it helps us draw some lines in the sand about browsers that we test on and say we support going forward. Not just for the documentation, but for the application as well, if it's a web-based application. And then, of course, operating system stats. This is telling us the operating systems, the actual number of the operating system and the viewership hitting it. I got a lot of Windows folks here, but I also have some Mac folks and some iPhones and some Androids hitting this site as well. So I want to pay attention to this, make sure I have a good responsive content strategy. So once again, we don't need to have our projects hosted there. Our HTML5 outputs can be hosted anywhere. As long as it's HTML5 out of Flare, we can start looking at all of this data. All right, so I'm coming back to the home screen here. Again, these widgets, as I mentioned, I kind of touched on these a little bit. These are these little information objects. I kind of like the storage and usage widget. It kind of gives me an idea of where I am. If I've got people I can invite who I can pass seats out to. If I need to buy more, of course I can. So, everybody's idea of what they want to see at a glance is a little different. So again, everybody's dashboard and the widgets that they see will look a little bit different. So I'm looking at the time. We've got a little bit of time left. I want to invite anybody to ask any questions here. If you have any questions on how the licensing works or the review workflow or how those analytics work, I'd be happy to answer them here. Looks like we've got a question in here. What are subject matter experts and do they cost money? Yes, so you license subject matter experts. They are added on. In fact, if you subscribe to the authoring and management system, you actually get a Flare license, a central author seat, and you get 2 free SME seats with each AMS subscription. So if you need to add more SME seats, you can do that a la carte. They're $10 per SME per month, so it's $120 per year for those SME seats. And once again, you can musical chair them around. So SME seats can be added on. You do get 2 free with your AMS, but you can add them on at any time. What if you have your own? We have our own source control system. Do we need to continue using that source control system? So you can continue to use the existing source control system that you have and be bound to Central. We call that being dual bound. But a lot of folks might find that it's just easier to be single bound and just bound to Central because again, you can be self-reliant to set it up yourself. It supports full branching capabilities, and we don't have to rely on IT or depend on them to get that going. So you can be what's called dual bound, which is your project is connected to your own source control and then a secondary clone of it on Central. Not a bad thing. It just adds a little bit of complexity. You're pushed into 2 places. So while it can be done, a lot of folks find the simplicity of Central and having a single repository much easier. What if my content is published to an internal web server that is on AWS and it has a login to get to it? Can I still get the analytics on Central? Yes, you can. Once again, it doesn't matter where your output is hosted. The analytics that I was taking a look at here earlier, if I go back to this one here, this is actually an output that I've published to an internal web server at MadCap. You actually have to log in with certain credentials to get to it. So it's not hosted in Central in any way. It's not connected to Central for source control. It's locked down to a certain number of users. So you can put your output anywhere. As long as your end users have an internet connection, Central's going to collect and grab that information so that you can report on it. We're not collecting any personally identifiable information, as you can see. We're just collecting the overall what. One thing I want to mention before we wrap, if there are some other questions, please drop them in. Speaking of all of this AMS and Flare and Central, there is a promotion right now where you can get 3 months free on any 3-year subscription for AMS, Flare, and Central. And those that attend the demo today get an additional 10% off if you purchase or subscribe by May 31st. So you can go to madcapsoftware.com/current promotions to see more, or email your sales rep and they'd be happy to help you. Also, I mentioned this yesterday, but I'll remind everyone, I would invite all of you to take our free introductory web-based training. We offer it a couple times per month. You can register on our website for free. Take a look at all of the modules that we cover in class. Excuse me, and sign up. You can sign up, your colleagues can sign up. Even if you're trialing the software, we would invite you to take this onboarding session. It's a fantastic day of training. And then lastly, we hope you can join us for our Mad World session, which will be June 12th through the 15th in Austin. Fantastic lineup of speakers and presenters, an advanced workshop on the third day, or the fourth day, excuse me, if you'd like to attend that. So do pop over to our website, take a look at the upcoming session. There is still time to register, not only in person, but for the first time, there is a virtual option for the main conference as well. So if you're not registered for that, we hope to see you there. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for attending today. I would be delighted if you could drop me an email if you have any further questions or clarifications you would like. I'd be happy to help you directly. Any questions on what we've talked about today, please feel free to jot down my email and send any feedback or questions that you have. So I want to thank everybody for joining. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and we hope to see you on another webinar and another presentation.